Hi everyone, my name is Misha. This is Halva for the Heart, Dying and Grieving in Diaspora. And today I'm interviewing Pauline Yeghnazar. She is a licensed psychologist, coach, and speaker who specializes in working with children of immigrants and intercultural couples. Trained as a sociologist, Pauline is curious about the ways in which culture, mental health, and geopolitical factors intersect. She practices from a decolonial and trauma-informed perspective and is passionate about reforming the mental health field to be truly healing. So I'm so glad you're here. I also want to note that we're both Iranian Americans, so I think we connect in that way as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I also majored in psychology in undergrad, and I definitely a lot of issues with the mental health field.
Yeah, I hear you there. That could be a podcast episode on its own.
Right, especially about grief. There's a
Mm.
lot of trying to diagnose types of grief. Yeah. Um, yeah, so like I said, we're both Iranian Americans. I think just kind of talk about the state of the world we're in now first. I just want to see how you're doing, especially as we're watching the death toll numbers slowly trickle out of Iran, with the protests and uprising there. How are you doing? How are you coping? How's your body doing?
Body's not doing so well, but we were chatting a little bit before we even started the podcast about the ways in which our body just tells us when it's reached its limit or needs some support. And I'm just acknowledging that my body's not okay, but that it makes sense that it's not okay, and being gentle with myself so that I can take care of it in whatever ways I can or I have the resources for. So I'm trying to take care of myself, but that doesn't mean that I'm feeling good. It just means that sometimes it just creates a little bit of softness or just gives you a few more resources to deal with. I think it's just our collective nervous system has been so rattled for the last few years, from multiple genocides to everything happening nationally in the US and recently just increased ICE raids and just the level of fear, anxiety, hypervigilance. And then with Iran, it's all people are my people, but I was born in Tehran. So there's something about things that go on in Iran that just hit something very deep within me. And I feel that. I don't have any living relatives there, but it kind of doesn't matter. I feel such a sense of connection. I think we're going to get into that a little bit as a child of diaspora and the connection that you feel to the land and to the people, that it just feels heartbreaking. And I feel that on a somatic level for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've never even been to Iran, and I feel that. I remember I was flying from Korea and a layover in Dubai, and we were over Iranian airspace, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God.
Oh my gosh, that kind of gave me goosebumps, right? Yeah, I don't remember Iran. I was born in Iran in the 1980s during the Iran-Iraq War, and we moved right before my fourth birthday in 1988.
Wow.
So I don't have a single memory of Iran, but when I see pictures or even videos, I know there's a resonance that my body just knows in the same way that you felt that just flying over the land. There's a connection to the land that I think is just ancestral and very deep, even if you've never been, even if you don't have any explicit memories of it.
Yeah, I mean, even it's funny because growing up, I was I feel so connected to the culture. It's not until a few years ago that I was like, oh, but the land too, like the physical land itself. Like now I'm watching videos of Lake Urmia drying up or the wildfires, and it's like the land is hurting, and it's just it's painful to watch even from so far, even though I've never been there. That sorrow is still very much it's in there, you know?
Yeah. And then there's so many multiple factors and layers. Like I've just spoken to a lot of people this week that were disconnected from their grandparents and their aunts and uncles and cousins and wondered whether they were alive or dead, because many are coming from homes where, like many Iranian people, very politically active and engaged. And so they were like, oh, my family is of the protesting type, they'd be out there, and to have the disconnect with the internet shutdowns and not being able to hear your loved ones' voices, just again, wanting to validate the level of fear, anxiety, uncertainty, and hypervigilance that people are dealing with on top of real grief that's been there. This isn't the first of what we're seeing in Iran, it's just after Women Life Freedom and just, the anticipated grief, as well as, like you said, the death toll rising, and just how that registers for us from a place that is so far away and so can feel so helpless in it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've just been wondering about this, and I'm sure you probably have opinions as well, but like, as a community, it feels like a lot of our elders weren't able to grieve and didn't teach us how to grieve. So I'm wondering like how you in your practice as a therapist like see that in other children of immigrants, especially of other Swana children of immigrants. How do you teach people to grieve in a way that feels culturally informed and isn't like the DSM handbook?
Oh gosh, the DSM handbook. Oh, yeah. I think that a lot of people have templates of what grief should look like. And before they can even practice or begin experimenting with grief practices that feel right for them and are culturally informed, they have to unlearn or maybe even examine what's been given to them. And there's so many multiple sources that we get these templates from grief, and they're subtle because you're getting them all the time, even if you're not experiencing an acute loss at the time. And it becomes this very unconscious script, right? Within more of a white culture and white supremacist culture, Western culture, there is this really timeline-oriented, linear process that a lot of clients that don't identify that way still find themselves adhering to, because those kind of value systems and that model is culturally reinforced, societally reinforced, and then is reinforced in the DSM. The DSM says if it goes past this date, then we deem this pathological. Whereas a lot of cultures, that first year, for example, would be a year of mourning, and that would be seen as pathological. So somebody's cultural practice that is common would already be deemed as wrong. And so I get a lot of clients who have absorbed a lot of this. It needs to go in these stages. They all tell me about the stages. And I'm like, don't you know that the creators even said it's not linear and not everyone experiences it? And most people are surprised to find that out. But it's linear. There's a right way and a wrong way. And it's going to have an end date. And you're supposed to devote a certain amount of time, but stay functional and, not get too and not too long. It's like all of these things need to be examined, because sometimes people don't know that they've absorbed it until they're running up against shame or pressure or expectation or frustration with their own grief process as it is unfolding naturally. And then many times it's looking at the other sources. How is this modeled? Sometimes we do have those culturally affirming practices, like the first 40 days or the first year, or ways in which the funeral processions go, how events are handled in the next year, things you do and don't do. And so sometimes clients have just a general sense of, okay, in my culture, they kind of do this, but then they've also got the sense of, how did my family handle it? Was it just complete silence? Was it just never talked about again? Or was this their inability to carry that person differently in spirit, but still have them be a part of the gem, part of the group? So each person kind of has maybe general, this is how my culture does it, and also like, this is how my family did it. And again, it brings up some of those same shame, frustration, or expectations about how they should be grieving. So first and foremost, I think it's about examining where we've absorbed templates, timelines, or expectations of how grief should go. And I think when we look at that and we're able to see what does or doesn't resonate with us, and maybe lower some shame and allow for that exploration to happen, then I find that people are just oriented to finding practices that feel really right for them, right? And every client does it in such a unique way, and does it in a way that feels like it brings together cultural and spiritual and other aspects of them. It's like once we examine where the shoulds are coming from and we lower some of the shame, that natural connection to how you want to celebrate what you lost, how you want to grieve what's no longer here, how you want to absorb and catalyze what is possible in spirit because of, like, all of that becomes just much more available to people. And I don't ever find myself having to kind of dictate that. People naturally engage in that once they have the space, the permission, and the shame is lowered that they're not doing anything wrong, that this is a process, and they are encouraged to kind of be creatively in it. Sometimes they'll pull from things that their family did or culture at large gave them as options, but really we look at it as these are all various options. And these are options for maybe different days. Sometimes you want that very structured, I'm going to go to church and light a candle. And sometimes you want to make an altar at home or make a meal and put your hand over your heart as you take the first bite. Like, all of it can be sacred and all of it can feel really meaningful for you. And that becomes, I think, how people can re-engage with their own grief process outside of what they were told it kind of should look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. I feel like I'm, at least in the Iranian community, I'm noticing people who, because in Iran, Islam is such a, like, their mourning practices are so intense and, like, run by the government, that people often are like, oh, I don't want to mourn in that way because that symbolizes oppression, and not really like able to understand that there's a reason why those are mourning rituals, because there is some benefit to it. And maybe it's not specifically about like this imam or this whoever, but you can take bits and pieces and apply it to your own practices. Yeah, so I just want to say that, just because like there's layers to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes people, especially first gen, second gen, children of diaspora, there can be this sort of confusion, not even confusion, there can be a sort of loss in and of itself of not having the one model that does fit you. It's like grief about not having a grief process or practice that fits wholly, perfectly, and accurately for you. And there's sometimes grief around that. Like, I wish I could just have a template for how to do this. I wish that could fit, because a lot of times when clients are like, not that, I couldn't do that, that feels oppressive, or not that, they're also feeling not that for, I don't know, the American funeral 2-3 days afterwards, and then people bring over a casserole and then it's a done deal. Like, I'm stereotyping here, but I feel like I can on this podcast a little, like maybe there's that extreme too. They're like, that doesn't fit either. And it leaves them feeling like there's a loss of legitimacy in the grief and the way that they're grieving. And it can feel like a lonely process because the models that have been presented to them feel somewhat incomplete or inadequate for the fullness of their experience. And that's where that play and creativity come in, as well as connecting to other children of immigrants, first and second gen, that are doing this kind of this part of it, but not that part of it, and creating their own and realizing that's its own flavor of a grief ritual, something that feels meaningful, but also might be a nod to tradition. And that is something that you get to put together like a mosaic. It's not, but it can feel like a heavy task in the midst of the overwhelming grief that sometimes is just looking for a structure. Like, just give me some structure, some certainty, because it feels so nebulous and big and without shape,
Yeah, I mean, that's why I so encourage people to to write things down for what they want from this. I mean, so often people are like, I'm going to be dead, do whatever you want. I'm like, okay, but then that leaves all of your loved ones not only just confused, but also like bickering. Like when my mom died, half my Iranian side of the family was like, we have to do a traditional Islamic funeral. And I was like, but we're not religious. Why would we do that? And they're like, it's tradition. And I'm like, that doesn't feel right. And my mom had mentioned things about how she called it her after party. She wanted an after I die party. And she like insisted, she's like, it has to be a potluck and there has to be a dance floor. Like that, that's what she wanted. And so like there was definitely like a lot of headbutting and being like, well, if we had actually had these conversations, everyone would be on the same page. I think, like in death doula training, what they teach us is whenever there's like family conflicts, it's like, can we all just agree that the person we're going to be listening to is the dying person, right? Other opinion, you can have other feelings, but we all need to be on the same page here. And that's easier when the dying person has been able to verbalize or write things down of what they want.
Yeah. And I can see the cultural pieces just in that too, discussing some of these taboo topics, listening to the individual versus a collective decision that's made based on how it always goes, how it must be done. You know, like even that becomes its own process, because I think it hits up against some of these cultural frameworks and ways that you're taught you need to be, versus each family kind of navigating that process true to them and honoring the person who's dying.
Yeah, it's like on one hand, I just like it's the Western values of autonomy till the very end, right? And also like I think it might be just easier as a death doula to be like, can we just listen to the dying person instead of like having to navigate the collective? Yeah, pros and cons. Every family is different, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. There's just so many pieces to that. And, you know, even as I'm reflecting on the conversation we're having now, I'm just aware of how many different kinds of grief there really are, right? We're talking about grief at watching your homeland, figuratively or literally, right? And the people on it be hurt and be violated and killed, and to be disconnected from the land and not know what's happening, and to feel that as a loss in your body, as a grief that it's like a dull aching wound that's always kind of there, longing for a home you've never been to, longing for a home you don't remember, longing for a home that even if you could go and did go back would no longer exist. It's like all of those are forms of grief. And also we're talking about like literal grief. You know, we're both part of the Dead Moms Club. And, you know, whenever people say grief, the first place my brain goes is to my mom dying 17 years ago, and like the literal loss of a person. Then there's all the other griefs of the life you didn't live, losses of identity, losses of relationships where the person's still alive, but you lost them. Or I'm helping a client through a parent who's losing their cognitive capacity, and really the loss that's there. The person's physical body is there, but their history and the relationship that they can have in this next season is going to look really different, and the immense grief that's there. I shared with you before we started, like I'm in the midst of a separation with my partner. Like there's a grief in the ending of a chapter and the restructuring of relationships and love and family structures. And so I'm just aware of the many different kinds of grief that we're talking about, even in this one word. There are so many ways to kind of look at it. And it makes me think of your original question of how do you help people metabolize it, is like sometimes just acknowledging these are forms of grief. That is what you're experiencing. This is a loss. This is a grief. This is a letting go. This is a, you know, something to, you know, need to move through. It's not just, oh, you're having a hard time shifting from one career to another, or, oh, you had a breakup. How do we help you just feel better now? It's like, oh no, that was a grief. And it feels like there can be hierarchies of which griefs are given more or less legitimacy in society. You say, oh, you know, I lost my parent. Of course, I'd say that's one of the big ones where people are like, oh my gosh, that's big, right? But if you lost a dog that was there with you through multiple seasons of your life, like people don't respond to this the same way, right? I broke up with somebody, and the meaning and the symbolism of that relationship was huge. And the grief I'm navigating is hitting on lots of other grief, where there's historical grief that is being compounded. Grief has that compounding effect. It doesn't all carry the same legitimacy. And sometimes helping people metabolize it is just acknowledging and validating that what they are experiencing is grief. That can already give people so much permission to move through it. Because our bodies and brains, I truly believe, bodies, brains, spirits, we know how to metabolize it. We are a part of nature, and nature has seasons, and it loses And then it comes back again, and then it loses again. It's not afraid of loss. And as meaning making beings, we have a little bit more work to do than maybe the trees do. But I still think that we are a part of nature and know how to grieve. It's in our blueprint. It's just about that acknowledgement, the permission. And then I see people engage in it. And then we need each other. I don't think people can grieve alone. There needs to be some collective. Trees don't go singularly through the process of winter. They go through it together. And we need community to witness and hold the intensity of that grief as we move through it together.
Yeah. I mean, that's often sometimes when I'm offering like one-on-one grief care, I'm like, I don't even feel like one-on-one is enough. Like there needs to be more people involved in this. One of the things that like, even like someone like me who I've been like in the grief world for years and years, I'm still like surprised when I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is a grief. Like there was I was trying to navigate like a group dynamic where there was some conflict and heated emotions, right? People were like, you did this, you did this. And then I was like, wait a minute, guys, I think this is a grief. I think we're grieving that like we trusted each other and now we don't feel like we can't, like there's a loss here. There's a loss of trust. And the moment you say that, everyone just kind of like soften, like immediately, like there's no more raised voices. Everyone's like, oh yeah, like I am grieving. And then there was a few months ago when I was trying to decide whether to move back to the US. And it was like the chaos of the US. And I was in panic mode. I was like, how do you make a decision? And in some ways, I'm like, it'd be an easier transition if I didn't have a choice. But it's that autonomy, that agency that makes it like, do I want to make this choice to move back to the US right now? And I was freaking out. And then someone said to me, like, maybe you're grieving the fact that like you thought America would be a stable place you could return to whenever you were ready. Like there's a loss in that idea. And I was like, yeah. And like I haven't really been scared since. Like I was like, now that I'm in like this understanding that it's a grief, like the fear was protecting me, right?
Yeah.
And like now that that's released, I'm like, oh yeah, I can grieve this and like move through it in a way that just feels a lot more. That makes me feel more stable. Like letting go of the fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, also have a really probably well-tuned toolkit for metabolizing grief. And I think there's, lots of people that's something they've got to slowly hobble together. And so just the grieving process itself can feel really scary. But you're right, just validating that it's a grief helps soften it so then people can engage in it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like that's like this is a grief. Like it feels so simple that it's like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the loss of an idea, the loss of a fantasy, the loss of that security, these
Yeah.
are all, yeah, there's every single one of those carries so much weight to it. And again, when you speak it, you give it that legitimacy because grief holds the weight of that word. And when you call something like that, oh, this is grieving that, it feels like you're really being seen in that.
Yeah. I wonder that, especially in the Iranian community where so many of the older generation are so nostalgic and they're like clinging on to the nostalgia. And it's like, do they know they're grieving? Like, do they know that? Have it's been so many decades. Like, have they even like done any processing, metabolizing of that? Or has it just been like desperation to go back to how things were?
Yeah. Or is the nostalgia part of their grief practice?
Yeah.
It's like the nostalgia in some ways keeps alive in the present what you can never get back from the past. It's like maybe it could probably be all of them, depending, someone not grieving and just being nostalgic, romanticizing, but somebody else maybe having done the grief and then holding on to the parts of the past that they want to keep alive with them now.
Yeah, the awareness that you're in the grief versus just like not understanding that it is grief. Yeah.
And I think some of it is like to grieve it's a right we all have, Like I always think about elephants grieving. It's like, again, we're part of nature. Elephants grieve. We need to grieve, but it's become a privilege because you need to have the resources and the support to be able to fall apart and have a season of falling apart. And I'm thinking of the leaves and the falling of the leaves, like that falling apart and metabolizing and maybe becoming something new. It has become a privilege because not everybody can grieve the way that they would maybe want to or being called to. And I think about many of our parents as immigrants coming to a new place. They didn't have the words for it. They weren't given the preparation for it. A lot of these decisions were made quickly out of necessity, maybe out of fear, and then get to a new strange place, even if it's romanticized a lot, which I hear in a lot of, our parents' generation of America, this land of milk and honey. And then you come and you've got to survive. Many people left without a lot of their resources. They're navigating a brand new system, even with, I think, some of the privileges that exist in the Iranian community. Like my mom had a master's degree in English Lit. My dad had almost a master's in mathematics. It's like the high education and the access to different jobs and things that they could have here and all of that. There are privileges, but to then survive in a new place doesn't give you a lot of time, energy, with what community sometimes to be able to look at what was lost. Like you need to take a beat to be able to actually fully acknowledge what was lost. And I think what was lost was constantly evolving as life here was going on. Cue the nostalgia. You have to know what the differences are between this place versus the other place to even know what you lost, to feel what you lost. And then survival mode doesn't necessarily give us access to that deeper feeling. So I really think about how many of that older generation didn't grieve because they didn't have the words, they didn't have the language, they weren't given the support, they didn't have the space, they were in survival mode. And so many times we have the next generation holding grief and naming grief that the people that experienced it directly aren't. That creates such a deep divide and disconnect. I do some riffs of that in my social media work of the generational divides of what do you have to be depressed about? I was the one that went through, it's like, yeah, but that's why, because you were the one that went through. And now I'm thinking about what you went through because maybe life here with the sacrifices has stabilized and grief often comes up in those stillnesses. And you're like, oh my gosh, my family lost what? My grandpa used to be a what? And then he had to clean blah, blah, what? The loss of prestige, what it could have been like. Then you're now having the emotional language, space, resources, maybe the community of first gen. Like our parents weren't like, we are immigrants and we band with other immigrants. I don't think they identified in that way. They knew they were immigrants, but many of them, most of them were like, now we are Americans, I don't think they even had that. Whereas most first or second gen children of diaspora, they are claiming that. That is an identity. So they've got that support. And so many times we're not just doing our own grief work, not maybe learning the language, not knowing the customs as much, being disconnected from the land. When people in your family, especially elders, die, sometimes those traditions and things are dying with them, the loss of that. And then something like what's happening currently in Iran happens, and it's fire to a flame that's already there, already always burning, and this desire for home and belonging in a way that our parents didn't experience. And that can feel kind of confusing. It's like, oh, we haven't gone through, putting it in quotes, as much. But because we have more language and all these other pieces, we're actually more in touch with our grief than those that had to bypass that, keep moving, not name it because it would have maybe incapacitated them. I've seen that a lot with Armenians because I'm Persian Armenian, Iranian-Armenian. I think about the Armenian genocide and the just absolute silence. Like I don't even know what that was, and I can't even. A lot of people tell me, "Oh my grandma was mute. I never heard her talk.
Wow.
Not just didn't grieve, just didn't talk. Just like a part of her died with that, even though she was still living." And so, there's just all of those pieces of what that generation kind of goes through, or the generation before, and then what we have the words for. And sometimes it feels much more intense and confusing and create conflict in the family system where there isn't that much understanding of that because there isn't that understanding of their own internal and historical process.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also, it's funny because I've always thought of it as you're talking like a generational divide, but then I talk to like young people in Iran and there's and it makes sense. They're also in survival mode, but it's like, oh, it's not like an older versus younger generation. It's people who are in survival mode and people who have space to, have space really and have the resources.
That's so interesting to think about it in that way. It's not location specific. It's like nervous system specific.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Which makes me sad for like people in Iran. Like they're suffering so much and they also can't grieve. Like there's like on top of everything else, there isn't space for them to grieve. Yeah.
Yeah. Because generally it feels like there aren't a lot of spaces designed for grieving beyond just like a funeral procession.
Right.
Right.
Like say like the Islamic tradition, like that feel not right, they feel like they can't participate in that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like reimagining it. Yeah. We have such a grief illiterate society, whereas what would it be like to have spaces for that just ongoing grief that is a part of life? Loss is just a part of life. And this is just the specific flavor of it, like children of diaspora grief, or the specific pain you and grief you feel when something is happening to your particular ethnic group. But I mean, I felt that grief for the last couple of years just witnessing the various genocides. I feel that when it's in my community and it's ice raids, like it's not, it can be stronger or more intense or more acute when it does feel quote unquote closer to home. But I don't know, I feel grief at all of those various places. We just don't have enough spaces for them, which is when I see, grief circles or, a lot of the people in the mental health profession or somatics or, death doulas, like creating those spaces for grieving and for people to just name it and to be in community with it. I just think about how important that is and how little we actually have that as a part and parcel of how society is put together.
Yeah, I often like when I host grief events, I often tell people that like I understand you're probably coming here feeling very tender and vulnerable, but also I want you to know that like you showing up here today like is activism. Like it is an act of resistance against a system that doesn't want you to grieve and feel empowered, like feel that, like feel the empowerment in that. And I think some people are maybe not in the place where they can feel that way about their grief. But it's a nice reminder to be like, no, you are actually doing something that not only is like, oh, our society is grief illiterate, it's that no, the systems want us to be grief illiterate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a powerful distinction for sure. It didn't just by chance happen, it's by design.
Yeah. Because like our ancestors had all these customs and traditions. And I'm thinking about like moving through like the winter season and learning a lot about like the ancient Iranian holidays and customs and stuff like that. And like there are so many holidays through the winter, which makes sense because like this is the most depressing time of year. So of course, like gathering together with community every other week and having a big feast, like that's mental health care.
Absolutely. And just things were slower. And so you could metabolize things. I think part of us even talking about so many different kinds of grief is it's coming at us so fast.
Mm.
You got like historical grief that, I always say, no matter what I'm crying about, if I'm grieving something, if there's a loss, somehow my mom's death is like gonna come up in that.
Mm.
It's like this like straight shot to all the other griefs. And that's what I meant by grief has this compounding factor, is that not only are there so many of them, there's so many of them simultaneously. So it's just, I think about our ancestors having that deeper connection to the land, the deeper connection to each other, slower pace of life. And so you could even think about what season you were in. And I say that with the privilege of living in Santa Barbara, which is one of the most like minimal range temperature change places. I didn't say that very articulately, but that's the temperature doesn't change much here. And so I do feel somewhat disconnected because it can be in the middle of winter and it's bright and sunny and shining outside. So it's like it's harder in some ways to be connected to the natural seasons of things. And I just think about, our ancestors, they offer us just an invitation to go experience some part of that again, even though modern society is not that, and things are so fast and happening simultaneously all the time. And it can be hard to name it, that those practices, even in just that small way, bring us back into that more natural rhythm that we're meant to be in, rather than this kind of unnatural rhythm that just speeds us up and makes people want to shut off their grief because it feels so overwhelming when they have so many other things to do, mouths to feed, and are in that survival mode.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, this podcast is called Halva for the Heart, and I've tried to make halva a few times, and it's hard, man. It takes skill. I'm gonna ask my challah this weekend to help me really learn how to do it. But that's something that I've been thinking about, why is that a funeral dish? What is it about that specific thing? And I have my guesses, but I think that it takes a lot of physical muscle.
Yeah.
It's a lot of physical muscle, and also you're gonna get tired, and so you're gonna need other people around you to take turns. And so that's the physical exertion, I think, helps move the grief in your body, and also requiring a group of people around you to take turns and literally lighten the load is not just a dish that I understand nowadays you buy the dish from the store, you bring it to the funeral, but there's a reason why it was cooked for funerals, and I think that's kind of forgotten.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. But even just asking your challah to, show you how she does it, that is just a small taste of the original purpose and this original thing. You don't have to learn to be a halva expert to just have that experience with your aunt right here, right now, learning about that, and that just how meaningful that is. And I think sometimes people make it really, really big, in order to be connected to my culture and to, again, grieve right, I've got to do this big thing, or I've got to do it perfectly. And sometimes it's about messing up the first 5 batches of the halva and then asking an aunt over the phone or, FaceTime, far away, how to do it, and her guiding you, and whether it comes out good or not, doesn't matter. It was what you got from that process that already connected you to the original beautiful byproducts of this thing and the role that it played in bringing people together. I think sometimes it just requires giving that intentionality to our actions rather than just looking at the final destination and kind of how it came out, because sometimes we can judge ourselves on that. Oh, if I don't make this perfect dish, or if I don't know the prayers, or if I don't do it in this particular way, then somehow I haven't grieved right, or I haven't grieved good enough. And I think it's that pursuit, the desire to even learn, even ask somebody about it. I think that is really meaningful, and many people don't give themselves credit for those pieces. Looking up the recipes even online, sometimes people feel oh, this is so not traditional. I'm no, you're using the resources available to you now to then access some small part of what it was, and that's meaningful, and that can be enough.
Yeah, I've also found in the last few years, I feel my last podcast episode was about this. I look about ancestral wisdom that I didn't know I had within me when it came to knitting. I was trying to knit, and I was I don't remember how to do this. Or similarly, when I'm trying to cook a Persian dish or something, and I'm I have the recipe, but what's the magic here, right? And just literally, I feel blessed that I can speak some Farsi. But even just verbally saying hey, Mamam Bozorg, please help me out here. I don't know what I'm doing. And then hearing her laugh and me like it lightens the mood. Like she's not laughing at me, but like we're laughing together. I'm fumbling my way through this. Like give me some tips. Um, and that's to me, it's lighten the pressure, right? It's not like you have to get it right. It's that I feel them with me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it feels, I'm instead of like grieving the fact that like I don't know how to do this and they didn't teach me. It's more like, oh no, we can still do it together.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between a grief practice that can make you feel closer, more connected, more whole, and a grief practice that actually just highlights additional loss. You know?
Yeah.
It's like if we let go of that pressure of it has to look this way. Or I didn't learn this, or I didn't know this. And that has room in it too. And okay, who can I bring along as I try and reinvest in this? Try and learn the recipe. Ask for divine and ancestral support as I go through this. Like that process can actually get you back in touch with the resources that are available to you right now and make you feel like you're grieving less, right? Soften that grief because you have the interaction with the person that is even showing you or guiding you, or even just like joining in the playfulness of you having this. Like that makes me think of my grandma. I mean, most grandmas are pretty terrible at giving recipes because they don't know. You know, they're just like, oh, then you do this and you do that. I made a macaroni and it was like literally soup. I was like, why is there so much water? She's like, well, you didn't drain the this or do the that. And I'm like, but you didn't say that. She's like, yeah, like that's the part. And like she would leave out things. And so it was like a soupy macaroni. It was like not good. And that was when she was alive. And I remember that kind of playfulness. And I brought it in just as you're talking about your moment with Mama Zorg. Like I brought that into times where I've tried something, you know, and that in and of itself kind of softens that my grandma isn't here and that I didn't learn a lot of our cultural dishes and will probably not make them the way I grew up eating them. And the pursuit of that makes it feel more bearable and bring some lightness to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people, when you talk about like we need to be educating people grief literacy, I think there's like this conception that like grief is sad all the time, and if you're not sad that you're not grieving, right? And I think there's so much more to it than that. I suspect our ancestors knew that as well, that like there's, and we talk about like the first 40 days where they wear all black and stuff like that's, I think they know the first 40 days are a low period, but that's not the end of it, right? There's the 1 year and everything, and like so there's like waves to it. And I think like I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Iran in terms of grieving and stuff, but at least here in the US, like I think people often feel nervous to bring up the dead person around you. And it's like, no, actually talking about them is exactly what I need. And it seems so obvious when you say that, like, please bring them up to me. They're all I'm thinking about. And people are just like, oh, I didn't want to remind you. It's like, remind me that they're dead. Of course I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when grief isn't a part and parcel of life, then I think it does kind of get sequestered in this sad and maybe even like shamey kind of box, you know? Like, let's not talk about that. It's a little stigmatized. Let's not mention that again. It's almost like this like toxic positivity, which then makes people even more afraid of the grief because it feels like, oh my gosh, it's going to be this heavy, sad thing that I'm going to inflict either on myself and experience it or on other people. It's like the sense that when someone's grieving, they're almost like contagious and people almost like pull away and recoil from them. But it's because I think grief has been lost as this natural part of life. And life is not all sad. So grief wouldn't be all sad either. Like there's so many times where, throughout the 17 years without my mom, there's been so many moments of deep connection and resonance with gratitude for the family members that I have in grieving my mom together. And we just did that when we got together for the holiday season. There's always a nod to her, a discussion of a family thing, someone bringing her up. And there's something so sweet about that. It's become like a part of our lives, a part of our family culture is always going to include grieving my mom because it's just there. You know, you're playing with my kids and talking about how cute they are and oh my gosh, and what would mom do? And then there's a moment of sadness, and then there's like, remember when she used to just squeeze the kids, and then we're laughing about, there's just all of these various pieces, and it's just part of that evening. It doesn't feel as, oh my gosh, it's this thing, and we have to run from it. And I think when people, yeah, are able to have the support that they need to manage and metabolize that grief. I mean, manage is not the right word, but the support to be able to metabolize the grief, then it can become a part of their life rather than just this quick little process they want to get through as quickly as possible. And they kind of flatten it because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of the thing that I get out of hosting like grief events and stuff is so often just like, well, then I'm staying in touch with my own grief. Like it's this like little check-in once a month. Like, how am I doing? How are you guys doing? It's so much easier. I heard someone say like microdose your grief. So much easier to microdose your grief than like wait till it erupts,
Yeah. And there's going to be different seasons, I think, for that too. There are times
Yeah.
I think grief is just like, especially as we're talking about like children of diaspora, children of immigrants, like that grief is going to be there.
Yeah.
It's like it comes out unexpectedly at little things, but being in the cultural in between spaces and various things that you see. I remember grieving the family I had watching the American like TV shows, right? Being like, oh my gosh, it could have been like this, but it's not. And now I have a very different idea of that. And I'm, thankful for the family I do have and understand them much more. But it's just, you can microdose as like a general practice of grief. That just needs to be just a part of our monthly kind of, I think monthly is a great time for it actually, frequency wise, like thinking about moon cycles, thinking that as women are cycles, like just all of that, just the cycle of like letting go, loss, grief. And then there's times where we're not doing all of that and then we're almost stunted or backed up with all of our grief. And then something big happens and it almost gives us immediate access to all the minute other griefs that we haven't looked at. And I see that a lot because people will come to me in crisis. It's the breakup that's actually, and I never grieved my dad. And this happened with my grandpa. And this thing happened, and my family's entire trajectory changed after that. And I don't have a relationship with my sister that I really want. And I don't know, I'm 40, but I didn't turn out how I thought it would be. Let's look at all of that. It's like, oh shit, that's been all that grief. But it's the breakup that kind of maybe opened the door to that. So I really like this idea of, people, even in their small communities, in their homes, in their families, in their small friend groups. You don't always have to go out and get like a professional or community space for it, because I think sometimes that can be overwhelming for people. I can imagine your circles are amazing and I would attend one for sure. But if that's overwhelming, it's like even at home, find a monthly little microdose because that's going to help with the big griefs that nobody can escape throughout this lifetime. And it just will make it so that you're in that process of digesting the grief and not make it so that you're backed up and have all of the other griefs to deal with as well. And I really have never worked with children of immigrants that are dealing with an acute grief that isn't wrapped up with all of these other nuanced griefs that they've never even explored or been given permission or been asked about. And when it comes out, it's like the body is just eager to open up and let go of some of that, to be witness to some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about, I have a friend who, she told me like every month when she gets her period, she watches like the saddest movie she can find just so she can just cry for 2 hours. And I was just kind of like, why? But now I get it. Like, I mean, I think they're also maybe like, clearly she's not crying just for the movie, right? The movie helps trigger something, right? And that's a nice way to do it. Just like, all right, this is my one day PMS day. I'm just gonna put on a sad movie, and this is my This is it.
Oh my gosh, it reminds me of talking. I just had a discussion with my group practice team about this recently. What's your cry song? You know, like the songs that people pick that they know if I play this, I'm going to have access to just emptying out the reservoir of sadness and tears. And it's not just sadness. Like, again, that's the maybe umbrella emotion, but all the minute pieces of that sadness that you get to release in that somatic form. You don't always have to understand exactly what you're releasing for you to trust that that release is what you needed. And I definitely have had multiple different kinds of cry songs over the years, you know, or different movies that my sister and I would watch. It's always like the one with, you know, two girls losing their mom, you know. Our brother was never in any of those movies. There's a lot more like sister mom loss movies than brother mom loss movies. But you know, just those kinds of things that, yeah, like you said, allow us to have access to that cathartic process of letting go and surrendering. I'm grateful that I got to do it with my sister because, again, sometimes that can feel overwhelming even when it's planned. And I'm reading the book Martyr. It's actually going to be a February pick for the Cultured Book Club. I run a free book club for the children of immigrants and always choose books that are related to our experiences, oftentimes written by children of immigrants or about, you know, intergenerational trauma and healing. And I'm reading it in prep for that. And it's making me think of the main character and how he has this like death grief day for his mom.
Yeah, he does. He like skips school and he's like, I'm gonna do a grief day. And I was thinking, when I read that, I was like, why just once though? I feel like that should be an annual thing.
Yeah, he went and just did his grief day, even though he didn't really know his mom, and like really went through the whole process of it, and he made it very much his own. And I loved that. I was like, oh, that's really special.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by creativity. Like that's not something somebody would guide you to do. That's something that just comes to you that then you engage in.
Let's shift towards what your offerings are, because I haven't joined any of your book clubs, but I would get the emails every month. And so I'm curious about like what other, if people wanted to work more closely with you, what else do you offer as specifically for like children of immigrants?
Yeah. I've got the free book club and we do a different book every month, every couple months, depending on what my schedule is. People get a free reading guide and we'll do a live. I often ask the author to come, and I've had some amazing chats with authors of just amazing books, and they all live on my Instagram feed, Pauline the Psychologist. And then I also have a free translation guide, which is probably one of the favorite things that children of immigrants get. It's 3 different scenarios of things that your parents would do, like the guilt trip, the comparison to your cousin and your sister, unsolicited advice. I think those are the 3. And it really breaks down the translation of what they're actually trying to say they may not have the language for, and different ways that you could respond to make that interaction and your dynamic with them go more smoothly. And it just came from my own work of working with children of immigrants for years. I mean, it's 15 years I've been doing this work. And just once having somebody say, every time my mom says this, and I'm like, what if she really means? And then it just clicked. And she's like, oh, that was the translation. That's what my mom is actually trying to say. And so that's a free guide as well for people to kind of get acquainted with some piece of my work. But most of the bread and butter of what I offer are my coaching programs. I have an individual coaching program, just me and a person going through this curriculum that is really everything I needed and everything I offer to other, mostly daughters of immigrants, but I have worked with men in a variety of different ways. And then I run that in a group format, which is my probably most special way to run it, just because the resonance of women from different ages and stages, but connected in some of these universal experiences or even themes of being children of immigrants can be so healing in and of itself. Like I remember that from myself when I started having these discussions of, oh, that's a thing. And it's not a me thing. It's a phenomenon thing. That's what happens when you have parents. Oh, that's a thing. And it just made me feel so relieved. And the group does that. And so the group is actually going to be, I didn't run it for the second cohort last fall, but I will be running it in the spring. So sometime February, March. So this is a great time to get on the wait list and I'm going to have some special freebies for the people that have been diligently waiting on that list since last summer, waiting for the group. And they're just intimate, really special spaces full of support and concrete somatic tools and all of the wisdom that I've gleaned from my own life, but also really many of my clients that I've worked with for years and years and years. So those are my main offers. And then I love doing stuff like this, media things, interviews. I do lots of trainings, and I'm working on a training for mental health professionals on working with children of immigrants and some of the frameworks that you need to use or think about, and how to really serve the children of immigrants as a specialty area. It just keeps getting longer and longer. I was going to originally do a 2-hour. It's now up to, I think, 6 or 7. So I got to just cap myself. And people will be able to get CEU, like CE credits through the American Psychological Association, if that fits for people. I really wanted to make it accessible so that they could use it toward the many continuing education credits you've got to do. So I'm working on that, and that should be coming up here in the spring/early summer. And then one kind of simple, immediate offer that I'm putting together. I haven't even really announced it yet, so it'll be a little special drop for those of you listening to this, is just, I've had so many people reach out that want just a one-time support. They're not ready for a program, or they've done a program and they just want that one touch kind of thing. And I think for the next few months, especially given the intensity of what's happening in the world, I'm going to be offering as many as my schedule will allow, hour-long $99 calls. Just coaching calls, so it can be with people from wherever in the world. I'm just having the sense that more and more people just want that connecting and touch point with somebody who's going to get it and who can offer some support. And I've done a few of them already just organically with people. And I think I'm going to just start offering that as something that I can offer that's a little more accessible than some of my programs, and yet still gets me to support people from all over dealing with whatever's on their hearts and plates. So that feels, yeah. And then if you happen to be in California or in New York, I do have a group practice with 4 therapists, and we all specialize in working. It's an entire practice devoted to the children of immigrants, third culture kids, biracial and multicultural kids. All we do, intercultural couples, families. And there are 4 amazing therapists that work alongside me, and they can serve people in California as well as in New York. And that's called Noor, like light. And in Armenian, Noor is pomegranate. So very symbolic for me. Noor, Noor Therapy and Wellness. And so you can check that out if you're interested in getting therapy services, but you'd have to be in one of those 2 states.
You were doing so much. I almost expected you at the end to be like, and I'm writing a book.
No, that is on the back burner. Yes. I do actually have a literary agent whose email I have not responded to in a very long time, partly because of all of these pieces. But yes, I am hoping that I get to write a book. I'll say it in that way. I am in doing the proposal, the book proposal part. So that's the part that I'm in, but I have an amazing and very patient, she's a little too patient with me, very, very patient literary agent that is supporting me. But I hope this is the year I at least get to birth that proposal and see if this is a book that can come out into the world.
I think it would be very needed. I just wanted to ask a quick question because I'm curious. The group program, is it for children of like from all over the world? Yeah. Okay, so you'll have people from like all sorts of immigrant status.
It's so wonderful. I thought about doing it in a way that maybe, stratified by age or by ethnic backgrounds, but really every time I've run it, and I just kind of beta tested it, and the first women that were there, it was a very diverse group.
So is it only women? I'm curious.
Only women, yeah. The group program is only for the daughters of immigrants. The individual program, the coaching program, I have adapted it and I've done with many, many men. So that part can be adjusted if it's just me and them, but the groups are female identified only. And I've just noticed that even with really diverse groups, there is so much resonance. And then there's sometimes middle children or babies, and then the eldest, and we see those various dynamics. And so I actually think that the diversity of the groups, with everyone being a daughter of immigrant, has led to so much cross-learning that I didn't want to limit that, right? Like I didn't want to make it even more more specific than that. There are often many Swana men identified women that are in the group just because they resonate with the content that I'm putting out. But I've had women from all over the world, as well as all different ethnic identities. And I think it just adds so much richness to the group.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like, especially in the Iranian community, there's like this like superiority complex of like we're special, and I'm like, no, let's build connections.
Yeah, and it's so important to honor the places that there is that specialness, right? It's like, oh, there are things that are different. Maybe not special, like there's special meaning different. Like, oh, there are differences. Like, oh, like I remember in the last group, someone being like, well, my African parents talk like this, or this is important to them. And it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Because for us, it was the education piece. Oh, for us, it was this piece, said like a Argentine woman. So it's like each person will kind of like look at some of those cultural variations. But the point is that your family sets up these expectations. And then what do you do when you don't have the same value system? You want something different. And so then we can connect on the universal themes while still noticing and allowing for those natural differences. And then it's more interesting when I've got multiple Iranian women, multiple Swana women with very different experiences, because I think, again, it cuts at this. No ethnic group is ever a monolith either. And sometimes you have far more in common with the like Ukrainian, child of immigrants who's living in Germany at this time than you do with the Iranian woman who's also in LA. So I think there's all of those pieces that I think make my decision to keep the group as diverse as possible. I keep coming back to that. And then the different ages too, people that are single, people that are, in committed relationships, people that are parents, and all the different ways in which it's almost like the same woman at different stages. So it's a really beautiful and sacred group, and it gives back so much to me each time I run it. And I can't wait to run it again. I kind of missed running it in the fall, even though it was the right decision for me. And I'm very excited to get back into it.
Well, I want to sign up, so I'm going to join the wait list for sure.
Come.
Well, thank you so much, Pauline. This is wonderful. I'll definitely like link everything below that you mentioned. Yeah, and if you don't follow Pauline on Instagram, you really should, because your videos are so relatable.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like they're serious topics, but like done in a very refreshing way. So
I try to be playful just because like that's how I handle my grief. One of the deepest and longest, most guttural laughs I've ever shared with my siblings was when my mom was intubated in the ICU. Like I could still laugh talking about it because it was so funny given the pressure we were under that we just, every time I think about it, I want to like giggle again. And of course that was probably protective to some degree, but I try and bring a light, and it's like, it's part of how I manage the grief in my own life, the heaviness of the topics that I work with, and how sensitive my heart is and how on fire the world is all the time. It's like that humor is one of the ways that I get by. And so I'm glad that you can pick up on that as well. The Instagram page is kind of my labor of love and I don't know, my ability to be creative, because I'm grieving that my parents didn't let me become an actress. And I became as doctorly as I could be with still doing something that's not very doctory, which is being a psychologist. I'm like, I'm a doctor, but not that kind. And so Instagram's the place I get to play, and just being able to bring attention to some things that, again, many of us never had spoken or acknowledged means a lot to me. And I get a lot from the community as well in terms of the resonance, the questions, people adding new things. It's such an organic space that I'm sure you can also relate to, even with all the downsides of social media. There's so much good there, and I really love that community deeply.
Yeah, definitely.
The work that you do, the Helva for the Heart, like just when I read the name, it already gave me that warm kind of feeling. I saw the beautiful displays of Helva that I've seen at various, like it's almost like a pyramid of Helva, or arranged beautifully with the nuts on top. Like it immediately gave me that visual, the taste, and that feeling all at once. I was like, what a perfect name. Thank you for the work you're doing, for giving space and voice for something so sacred and something so natural to life and its various seasons, but something that just doesn't get enough airtime or support. Like, thank you for the work you do. It's really, really important.
Thank you so much. Well, yeah, let's wrap up here.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Misha. It was so wonderful to get to meet you.